Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1.73 Mission Over Measure podcast. Today, we're going to do something a little different. And in the spirit of the Olympics and the USA bringing home the gold for both the men and women's team in hockey, we thought we'd go over, I think personally, one of the greatest stories that encapsulates the Mission Over Measure idea, which is the story of Herb Brooks and the 1980 Olympic team, which was the last time the U.S. had won gold in hockey before this year. So we're going to break it down in the context of the hero's journey and hopefully help tell a good story about how someone can break through all measures if they pursue a really high mission.
Yeah, Henry, I love this idea, and I especially love it because at the end of the day, I mean, you were born 21 years after they won the gold medal in 1980, and it was, oh my gosh, I was 12 years old, I think it was. And I just remember like watching that in the living room and just going crazy. It was a pretty amazing experience. So let's get that model up on the screen here so that we can actually kind of walk through. And yeah, so why don't we just talk a little bit about for those of you that are familiar with Hero's Journey, hopefully this resonates. For those of you that aren't familiar with Hero's Journey, I'll apologize. I won't speak for Henry, but we are going to basically ruin every movie or book of fiction that you watch or read moving forward, because literally everything is built on this model. You're gonna understand that in a moment. So let's start off with Henry. Probably go back to 1960, the 1960 team, when the U.S. it was 1960. I think they won gold, if I'm not mistaken. Then
Yes.
1980, and then 2026. You want to take us back to 1960? What was Herb Brooks' Ordinary World? And actually, before you start that, I just invite anyone listening. If you're just listening to this, you want to get back where you can actually see it, because Henry and I are going to walk through this model visually. But one of the things you want to do is just imagine for yourself kind of how this model applies to you. And Henry's going to do a great job of kind of tying in the whole concept of distinguishing the measures that we confront versus the missions that we might pursue. So what was Herb Brooks', we'll say, ordinary world? Because that's the first part of any hero's journey, is we are just present to status quo today.
Yeah, so 1960, Herb Brooks, and spoiler alert for anyone that doesn't know the story or have seen the movie, Herb Brooks originally was on the 1960 U.S. team to compete in the Olympics. He was playing hockey, he made the team, and then about a week before the Olympic Games, he gets cut. So I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I think it's important to say that because it kind of sets up the stakes of this whole story. So his ordinary world is he's playing hockey. His call to adventure is he makes the U.S. team. His ordeal is he gets cut, right? So now he doesn't know what to do. His reward and return is a little different. He doesn't necessarily succeed like you would in a typical hero's journey. You know, the hero brings back the gold, they bring back knowledge. Luke Skywalker he blows up the Death Star, and he literally gets a gold medal around his neck at the end of the movie. That's your more typical successful hero's journey, but in the context of Herb Brooks in 1960, I think the thing he comes back with, not necessarily reward, but it's a commitment, a recommitment to try again in a different context, and that comes to fruition in him coaching the 1980 team. But as someone who just assuming based off the stories we know about him, seemed highly committed to winning and competing, and his commitment, I think, was the reward.
Well, and it's so interesting because at the end of the day, what was the measure that was put on him in that 1960 experience?
Well, the measure was that he wasn't good enough. That he was the last guy to get cut before the games. He was the 21st man. I'm assuming in 1960 it was they had to get to 20, so he was the 21st man.
Yeah, and if you've any like the interviews you've seen, stories that you may have heard, Herb Brooks shares watching the 1960 finals with his dad, and his dad says, "Well, I guess they cut the right guy." I mean, I can't imagine what his experience was in that moment, where like he's given everything possible to pursuing this goal, and he gets cut. He's the last one to get cut. There's a whole bunch of people that got cut before him, but he's the very last one to get cut. Number one, just the challenge, the ordeal. That's a great expression of an ordeal, being confronted with one. Like probably, I would imagine he's saying like, "Well, who am I now that I'm no longer part of this?" And then to come home and have one of your parents basically start busting your chops about like, yeah, I guess they cut the right guy. I'm like, holy crud, was that was something else. So to your point, I'm imagining Herb Brooks. He absolutely had a choice in that moment. I could quit. It's a viable choice. Just stop. Or he could say, I'm going to overcome being cut, perhaps, and this is me and just my opinion, that it was more about, I'm going to prove everybody else wrong. I'm going to prove my dad wrong. I'm going to prove my family wrong. I'm going to prove the coach who cut me wrong. I'm going to prove wrong the other players, my teammates. Not that I don't know. I would not imagine it was a contentious relationship, but when we make that commitment to pursuing something that's that important to us, I've found people end up moving. I've witnessed people moving mountains when the commitment to a mission is that strong.
And on top of all that, it's having the patience and the faith to not know when that will happen. He waited 20 years for that to come to light. I'm assuming I don't know a whole lot about his story in between 1960 and 1980, but I know he coached for Minnesota, which was his new ordinary world. He went off and coached Minnesota. He won multiple national championships. And so having the patience to wait 20 years to have an opportunity to stay on that mission, I think is really remarkable. So then going back to our hero's journey model, now it's 1980. His ordinary world, he's coaching Minnesota, winning championships. He's got a great team. He could stay there and just continue to win at the college level, but as we know, he wants something greater. So his call to adventure is he gets the opportunity to coach the 1980 Olympic team. And his ordeal in that is kind of multifaceted. I would say one part of it is the Olympic Committee going up against them. If you watch the movie, at the beginning of it, he's
the movie Miracle.
the movie Miracle, yes, the movie Miracle. He's basically up against everybody in that room. Everybody's saying, how are we going to beat the Russians? How are we going to beat these guys? They just beat the NHL All-Stars. How are we going to do it? And Herb Brooks is like, well, we got to beat them at their own game. And he lays out this plan, and they take a leap of faith on him, and they give him the job, which I think is credit to them for giving him the opportunity. And then I think the other half of the ordeal is going up against the expectations of the whole country. I think it's mentioned in the movie and probably in interviews with the players and Herb Brooks after 1980, but they were going up against the expectations of the whole country. Everybody thought that they were just going to show up, compete, maybe win a game against Czechoslovakia or something. Well, actually, no, they were pretty good. Who whoever, maybe win a game, show up, represent USA, go home. No one expected them to win. I mean, Herb Brooks, I think did, but he was probably the only guy.
Well, it's interesting. Again, not knowing all the details, my guess would be well, my own journey, my own path on this journey, there's more doubt that enters the story between Call to Adventure and Ordeal than in other places in my experience. And I would think that at some point Herb Brooks had probably some high levels of doubt. Like, could we really do it? I mean, and by the way, you're putting everything at risk. The moment you cross, and as the diagram shows, there's the space between those arrows. You're kind of crossing thresholds in those spaces. And when you go from that Call to Adventure to Ordeal, you can't go back. Like, once you're in the Ordeal, you can't go back and say, oh, wait a minute, second thought, I don't want to do this. Well, I guess you could. It tends to be a complete mess. But Herb Brooks' willingness to pursue that, and he's doubted by everyone. And I remember there's a great scene in the movie Miracle where Craig Patrick, the assistant coach, it's during tryouts, and Craig Patrick is saying, like, Herb, like, who are we going to choose? And Herb Brooks says, oh, I already got the team. He goes, and Craig Patrick says, well, hold on, we've got like another day worth of tryouts. What do you mean you have the team? He said, oh, I built the team already. And Patrick's like, what do you mean you've built the team already? Like, we need to figure out who the best players are. And Herb Brooks says, Craig, I'm not looking for the best players. I'm looking for the right players. And again, that was another point of criticism or measure, if you will, from the Olympic Committee to say, what are you doing? Like, your method of building a team or assembling a team, coaching the team, you're going to throw out all the coaching strategies that the U.S. has used for a long time. And I love it because Brooks, I mean, how you can't have any better empirical evidence that something is not working when you go from 19, like last time you won the gold medal was 20 years ago, folks. Clearly your process is not working well. But it's interesting because that's almost, Henry, if I go back to the ordinary world, just playing around with this model, is that in the minds of the Olympic Committee and those that ran USA Hockey at that time, they were so committed to the ordinary world of the way they've always done things, right? It was just, it's a little bit nuts almost to think about that. So Brooks, Minnesota coach, invitation to coach the Olympic team, and he's faced with all of those ordeals. And I love that you mentioned the U.S. is placing enormous pressure, not necessarily on specifically because of the hockey team or specifically because of Herb Brooks, but like where the United States was at that point in history, in time. It wasn't a good time. It was messy on all sorts of levels.
Yeah. And that's how the movie Miracle opens up. It opens up with basically from 1960 to 1980, all these landmark events in U.S. history, some good, a lot bad. It shows Watergate. It shows all this different stuff. And it really sets up those measures, those where the country was, what he was going to go up against. And on top of all that, his story in the film also shows, what he has to sacrifice at home. Taking that call to adventure. It's another thing that he risks is the relationship with his family and with his wife. It's a strain on them. But I love what he says. It's towards the beginning of the film. He's watching film on the Russian players, and his wife comes in and she's like, "Hey, the kids got one's got practice tomorrow, one's got band. Which one do you want to pick up?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. You go get the friend to do it." He's focused on this, and his wife is like, basically the conversation goes to, it's like, we didn't even talk about you taking this job, coaching the U.S. team. Like, when did we talk about this? And he ends up apologizing. He's like, I'm sorry, but like, I have to do this. He says, I have to do this. And she understands. what he has to do, because I think his measures are placed that he placed on himself in 1960, or that was placed on himself from the coaches that cut him. His dad saying that when they were watching the game started in 1960, and his mission to break through that is coaching the team and winning.
And so that's like we take to that next stage of reward and return. The idea behind this is, well, the reward, certainly in the context of Herb Brooks and 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team, was that they did bring home the gold medal. But I want to stick on the reward and return for a moment. There is a reward if you're willing to go through that ordeal, and you don't know what you're going to encounter, but there's things that must die within each one of us for us to actually come out of the ordeal. And if we're unwilling to let those things die, we actually end up dying, probably more than anything, kind of spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, more than anything else. But they win. That's the reward. Herb Brooks is a different person. So the whole idea of this going from the ordinary world, embarking or taking that call to a new adventure, willingness to go through the ordeal, you do get the reward because you're a transformed person. What was Herb Brooks' transformation? It was breaking through any of the measures that his father or his family put on him, maybe even of his teammates of 1960, breaking through the measures that the Olympic team, the Olympic committee placed upon him, and all the disbelief, the breaking through, to your point, the opinion of the country. Like, can these guys do it? No way. The Russians? Nobody's beating the Russians. Breaking through all that, like that is transformational work that provides an enormous opportunity, an enormous reward. And very simply put, you return a different person. And I would assert you return a stronger, smarter, faster, wiser person than anything else. So, it's interesting, and I'll say it this way, that if we kind of let's look at maybe a model for all of us, all of you listening, Henry, for the two of us. It's such a great model. And we're just using Herb Brooks and the 1980 Olympic hockey team to illustrate this model. But it's one of those where, for me, I look at this and I say, all right, well, there's measures placed in, there's measures that you are going to confront in each one of these stages. We didn't really talk about, like, the final test is part of the hero's journey, is between ordeal and reward and return. It's like you're going to get tested one more time just to make sure. And if we go back to 1980, they beat the Russians. That was a major win, but they hadn't won the gold yet. Who was it that they beat?
Finland.
So the final test was they had to beat Finland so as to get the gold medal. But it's interesting because if you look at things, for me, just a quick review of like ordinary world. And by the way, there's lots of them. And the roles that we play in life, I'll say it this way: the roles that we play in life, each role carries its own distinct journey. And then, for example, each role carries its own measures. When I started in the coaching business 20 some odd years ago, I think it was. And it worked well. Like that, in fact, was a call to adventure, building something from scratch. The new adventure was to commit myself fully to building that. Well, the ordeal is very interesting. It wasn't success. And I think a lot of times, I know before I actually learned to look at life and business and use this hero's journey truly as a guide, is like a phenomenal guide, just a wonderful compass, is that when I started the coaching business, it was a wonderful adventure. There was some success. What I did, though, is the ordeal was, it worked until it didn't. and I was pursuing things that I shouldn't pursue. And the bottom line is it ended up in business failure for that business. That was the bottom of that ordeal arrow. Like it was like, who am I? Why am I doing this? Why is this going this way? And it's interesting because we talk about meeting mentors along the way and meeting people that introduced me to this idea of business operating systems and realizing they actually have tools and structures and systems that I can use. And if I employ those, like, it'll work a lot better. So that was some of the reward and return. In the business now, True Point Advisors, like, we're off on a new adventure, building out programs versus what we've been doing historically. And the best part is, I would assert we're here right now, but using this, we know exactly what's next. There will always be an ordeal. It's always going to get more difficult. There's always going to be final tests before we get that reward and return. And it's been interesting because we talked a little bit about, kind of just posing that question to folks, what's your journey over measure? There's plenty of things that can stop you. And there's plenty of things that I believe or that I've experienced could stop me. At the same time, it's like using that model, it's become, at the very least, understandable, and at the very best, easier to just say, whose measure am I using? If I'm using other people's measure, it always makes the journey more difficult. If I define my own measures, it's still challenging, but using that model, I've realized I probably come up with the better measures, or the ones that are more applicable. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think a core part of this whole hero's journey, and Herb Brooks, your journey with your business, it all involves, I don't think anyone can do it alone per se. Like you said earlier, you need mentors, and perhaps in the context of Herb Brooks' story, he wanted to win, but he was the coach. He can't go play 5, 6 positions on the ice. He needs a team, right? And so a part of his journey was convincing a group of college hockey players that half of them hate each other from Minnesota and Boston, that they can win. And I think a important part of going on a journey and realizing you need help is being able to inspire and build the confidence in the team around you to go on that adventure with you and know that you can do it in the face of the measures placed upon the mission.
Yeah, it's such a great reminder that don't go on this alone. Don't go on that journey alone. Your world may seduce you to think you've got the tools, you've got the knowledge, you've got the experience to successfully go on your new adventure and make it through that journey. I'll offer some advice. You know what they say about advice. Don't take it. So take it or leave it. Just don't go all alone. I mean, there's so many people that you have around you that will help. I mean, mentors in the hero's journey, the literal hero's journey, are there to offer tools, resources, magic, camaraderie. And by the way, those mentors don't stay for the whole time. I would assert, Craig Patrick, the assistant coach, was probably a mentor to Herb Brooks in many ways. Far more empathetic person than a challenging person. The one Olympic Committee member who kind of advocated for Brooks when everybody else was like, you're crazy. No, there's no way you can do this. I mean, that mentor put things on the line on behalf of Herb Brooks. So that's the real value, the power behind finding some wonderful mentors or teammates to travel that path with you.
Yeah. Great moments are born from great opportunity, right? Isn't that what he says?
Every time.
He also says, if you lose this game, you'll remember it for the rest of your lives. But they don't show that part in the movie.
Well, he used different words.
Yeah.
Or you'll go to your effing grave. And then he walks out And then he walks back in and he just says, "You're effing grave." And then he walks out again. Again, and each one of those players, guess what they were on? Their own journey. Yeah. So like they were constantly being measured. And, there's that wonderful scene with, oh my gosh, it wasn't O'Callahan. The one that got, oh crud, he injured his thigh and he was like,
McClanahan,
and like probably like complaining like, "Hey coach, I can't play." And Brooks just said, "Then get your stuff off. You're done.
Put your street clothes on. I got no time for quitters."
I mean, mentors, that's a flavor of what mentors can do for us, is push and challenge when we don't see the clear path in front of us. And again, it goes back to, we talked about it when we started, Henry, I think the lesson, I'm imagining a powerful lesson or outcome from the lesson Herb Brooks learned from 1960 was he just said, "I'm so committed to this mission. I'm unwilling to quit."
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to what you said earlier about, things having to die to go on the mission, I think he went through a change personality wise, at least for the time period in 1980, where he becomes that kind of fire under the whole team, where he's hard on them. I think there's a scene where they're saying like he had coached some of the guys on the team in Minnesota that are now on this Olympic team, and they say like, "Was he always like this?" And he's like, "No, this is new." So I think that's an interesting point to bring up, because there will be a time where you will have to change on your own journey. You have to become something different. And, in the context of Herb Brooks, it's becoming this really rugged coach that just lights a fire under them. It can look different for everybody, but knowing that, like you said earlier, things will have to die, parts of you will have to die to accomplish that goal is necessary.
Yeah. And so I guess for everybody listening, if we kind of maybe move to kind of wrap things up, let's I think you guys will figure out. We'll put that kind of put that diagram that we were using in the notes in some way, shape, or form, or make it available. Just a link to it. Invitation. Discern like what's your ordinary world today. What's your new call to adventure? You aren't going to necessarily know. At least I have never experienced knowing what the ordeal is going to offer, but it's the most, I believe, the most necessary part of a successful journey is going through that. The reward and return you're never going to really see. You may have some ideas what you want it to be. A lot of times it's not actually what it turns out to be. You get something, you might get what you set out to accomplish, but you're going to get a heck of a lot more. And then you come back as a new person to the ordinary world. But I just invite listeners to map it out for themselves, because we're all on a journey and adventure at some point in time. And this has just been such a great compass and a great resource to guide you. And we just happen to use Herb Brooks in 1960, 1980, and I can't speak because I don't know enough in this moment about the 2026 team. There's another opinion I've got about professional players versus amateur players, but maybe that's for a different podcast.
True. Very true. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Mission Over Measure podcast. Again, we'll put that little diagram in the description below if we can, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Hey there. If today's episode hit home, it's because you know this. Your mission is bigger than any metric, diagnosis, or expectation placed upon you. At Get TPA Fit, we help entrepreneurs and leadership teams delete chaos, earn more, and build value so they can go from stuck to unstoppable in the pursuit of their mission. Visit gettpafit.com to learn how you can break through those measures and pursue your mission.